Hey gang, this week's episode is brought to you by oldschoolshirts.com. Hey, check them out. You like defunct teams and leagues and t-shirt form? Well, you'll find them there, but a whole bunch of other stuff too. Do you remember a radio station of the past or perhaps a mall that you used to go to? All kinds of great cultural and sports memories can be found at the great folks at oldschoolshirts.com. Promo code GOODSEATS for 10% off all of your purchases. And now, here's our show.
They got to get rid of it in a hurry. It is complete, but that's the end of the ball game. The Memphis Showboats are 3-0, and the defending champion Baltimore Stars are now 0-2-1, going home to play the New Jersey Generals next Sunday, a week from Sunday, at Byrd Stadium in College Park. With Paul McGuire, they're going to have a party with Pepper Rogers tonight in Memphis. Memphis wins it 21-19. The scene in the locker room with Pepper Rogers, the joyous coach, and his players. He gets involved with his players.
Yeah, he really does. He's a fun coach. He said, we're just going to go out and knock heads with people. We don't do a whole lot of things fancy. And I think the biggest credit has to go to this defense. You know, they held in the first half, only gave up 13 points, and they really did well. In the second half, they did a number.
All right, don't forget, Monday Night Live on ESPN, Jacksonville Bulls at the Arizona Outlaws. Kick off at 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific time. Next Saturday on ESPN, a live USFL doubleheader. I'll be in Tampa Bay for the game between the Bandits and the Arizona Outlaws. And then next Saturday night from the LA Coliseum, Steve Young and the LA Express going against the San Antonio Gunslingers. Paul McGuire, it's been a pleasure working with you tonight, and a pleasure, I know, with these Showboat fans in Memphis.
Yeah, you think this isn't a great pass and catch? Derek Crawford. Walter Lewis is tremendous.
Tremendous athlete, and the Memphis Showboats have a tremendous record. The fireworks are popping tonight in Memphis, Tennessee. Our final score, the Memphis Showboats 21, the Baltimore Stars 19. For Paul McGuire, I'm Tom Mee. So long from Memphis.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Hey, what do you say? My name is Tim Hanlon, and this is Good Seats, still available, the Curious Little podcast that is devoted to what used to be in professional sports. We appreciate you finding us, and if you're new around here, well, this is what we do on a weekly basis for you. We've been doing it for almost 10 years now. Where you been? Plenty of library content for you to explore if you're new here, but our little want around here is to kind of deep dive into these various nooks and crannies of sports history and then the pop culture ephemera attached to them that for whatever reasons may have escaped your mind, certainly mine. And it's a journey. We're on it together, and we keep looking for all kinds of stories and things that we vaguely remember or maybe just are incredulously in disbelief about, finding out that actually did happen. But for whatever reasons, we are only just newly discovering it. Whatever reason brings you here, we welcome you to the tent. And this week, we are truly stuck in a time warp. As you know, last week, we had a fun conversation with Greg Singleton as we went back to the original USFL, a frequent topic around here. But that conversation was centered around our first truly deep dive into the San Antonio Gunslingers saga, and an adventurous one that was. But we're going to stick around the USFL, the original version thereof, because we have our previous guest from episode 429 back in January, Keith Wood. He not a native Memphian there in Tennessee, but certainly a convert because he has become the unofficial, official, I would argue, sports historian and culturist around Memphis sports, as we learned about the Memphis Red Sox of the old Negro Leagues, plural back then. We are just lucky to know that Keith has a brand new book out on, wait for it, the Memphis Showboats of the USFL, the original version. You heard that clip there. That was from, I think that was week 3 of their second season. So remember the USFL, the early version, the traditional, the official version was from the early 1980s. Their first season was in 1983. The second season was in 1984, where the Memphis Showboats began their journey. And then in 1985 was their third and last season. And that clip was from week 3 of 1985. That's the Baltimore Stars, despite some confusion by Paul McGuire, and hard, you can't blame Paul McGuire for not knowing that the Stars were now in Baltimore after having been in Philadelphia. As we've talked about in a previous episode about the Stars, you should search that one up. The Stars were, in theory, they were in Baltimore, but they actually never played in Baltimore. But they did traverse Maryland and other places. But I digress. That was perhaps one of the more amazing games in Memphis Showboats' original USFL history, as they defeated the defending then USFL champion Philadelphia, becoming Baltimore Stars. Memphis trailed 13-0 in the third quarter and came back and won 21-19. And just a great memory. This was a really good example of what people like Reggie White and Coach Pepper Rogers, who was quite a character and part of the lore of this team. Derek Crawford, who was part of the mix as well, and so many other figures and stories that sort of were part of all of this amazing, short-lived but fun time in Memphis, in sports, and in USFL football history. We are just ecstatic to have Keith back to help us go deep down into the story of this team, which is very clear. Memphis really kind of took to. It was quite the sensation for a period of time. I think Pepper Rogers, in many respects, because of his personality, was beyond just the coach of the team, but he was kind of the heart and soul of it. And there were some moments of great success. And matter of fact, that 1985 season, the Showboats were literally one game away from making it to the USFL championship game. And we all know what happened at the end of that season, right? The court case and all that stuff, and the desire, actually the vote, which was official, to move to a competitive season in the fall against the NFL, which essentially kind of doomed the USFL, the original version, to its extinction. But for a brief moment in time, 2 years plus, I guess, Memphis, Tennessee enjoyed the trappings of the USFL. It was arguably one of the more successful and enduring franchises. I think the fans fell in love with the team. I think the team fell in love with the fans, and they were quite exciting on the field, certainly in 1985, a little less so in 1984, but they were also full of dynamism in their brief moment in time in the USFL. And we are excited to present this conversation with our return guest, Keith Wood, in a few moments' time. The name of the book is called The Memphis Showboats, the USFL Team and the City's Fight for Major League Status. It is promoted, I was going to say. It's published, that's what I'm trying to say, by McFarland. And, of course, you can find a convenient link to our partners at Amazon here in the show notes of your podcast description here, however you're getting it in your podcast feeder. Of course, you can go to our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com, search up this episode numbered, 453, and you'll find convenient links there too. And we get some shekels of referral love. But I also do want to help you save some money, and you can get it probably for a little bit cheaper, and maybe even get a signature from Mr. Wood in thanks for purchasing the book directly through him. And that's at his website. It's Keith, Keithb, the letter B as in boy, Wood, author, Keith B. Wood, author, all one word, .com. And you will be able to purchase the book directly from Keith and perhaps get a little inscription in there, and just tell him that we sent you, okay? That's just to give us a little wink and a nod to him, to let us know that, let him know, both know, that you found out about the book and him through the show, and there you go. And again, save a couple of bucks, buy directly from the author, why don't you? If you're too lazy or you just want to support the show, by all means, buy it through the Amazon link. Either way, get the book because you're going to enjoy it. And here's a little taste of what you can expect. Here's our chat that we had with Keith about a month plus back. We wanted to time it alongside our Gunslingers chat from last week. Please, as always, enjoy. Okay, you're not native to Memphis.
No.
Tell us how you got there and what you've done since you've gotten there, because
Sure.
this is not your first turn of, so I would say, sports history and Memphis and the
No.
reasons behind it.
Yeah, Tim, appreciate you having me on. So my story is I'm a kid from upstate New York in a industrial town called Schenectady, New York. You're going to find General Electric and American Locomotive were huge, large immigrant populations, and grew up in a very immigrant neighborhood, ethnic neighborhood. And then after college, a job opened up in Memphis, Tennessee. So in 1994, I packed up everything I owned in the back of a U-Haul trailer on my mom and dad's car, came down to Memphis and made a go of it, right? Really worked out well. Taught in an inner city school, became the head basketball coach fairly short thereafter. Um, and then coached for 17 years. Uh, then moved to a private Catholic school, Christian Brothers High School, part of the Stallion family of schools. Got my doctorate, and then began writing sports history books. Right, so my first book was on Memphis icon Larry Finch. Followed that up with our recent conversation on Memphis Red Sox of the Negro Leagues, and just sort of continued the discussion from basketball to baseball and what's next but football. So here we are with our book on the Memphis Showboats, from an adopted New Yorker who now claims to be a Memphian.
So we'll get to why you haven't done the Memphis Rogues of the old North American Soccer League on some other discussion. Hint, real
Right.
quick.
Yeah, there you go.
So let's set the tone for this, because we love the USFL
Right.
specifically because it's newer in terms of its defunctness, if you will, and it's still very much remembered and rehabilitated, if you will. And now it is the second incarnation of the UFL, but the tributary to that was the second incarnation, one of the tributaries of the USFL, which merged with other stuff, right? So,
Right.
and Memphis Part 2, if you will, of this reconstituted USFL was a throwback to the original. But before we get to
Right.
that,
Got it.
give us a little bit of a sense of Memphis as a football town,
Right.
because
So-
it was very much part of the pro game in the earliest days, never really kind of achieved that. Certainly very, very big in the collegiate and high school realm. And
Right.
it's always been sort of in this, shall we say, secondary market consideration for pro
Right.
football as the decades rolled on.
Right. So, Tim, I think you hit the nail right on the head, right? So Memphis is in the heart of SEC territory. We are 45 minutes away from Ole Miss. We are on the other end of the state of Tennessee from Knoxville. So there's UT. We are an hour and a half or 2 hours from Mississippi State. We sit, and so if you're at Mississippi State, you're 30 minutes away from Alabama, so about 2.5, 3 hours from Alabama. You sit in the center. It's a huge recruiting city for the SEC. The SEC will come in and get football players, and historically have got some really good players out of the city, right? So, Memphis has football has always tried to place itself as a, what we would call a Power Four school today, and really has been left outside of conversations. And I think that's the centerpiece of this story here, right? So in the 1960s, right, David Dixon, who's going to be very critical to creating the USFL in 1982-83, is down in New Orleans, and he is able to manipulate the Louisiana State Legislature, the United States House of Representatives, and with a little quid pro quo action, is able to get the New Orleans Saints, after their commitment to build a dome, into the NFL, right? And at this point in time, Memphis in the late 1960s, we truly think in the city of Memphis that we are deserving of the NFL, that the shield the NFL should be in Memphis, Tennessee. And we've been hosting exhibition games. And in fact, if you look at the numbers between New Orleans and Memphis, Memphis puts more fans in the stands during those exhibition games. Yet David Dixon, in a backroom deal, is able to leave Memphis at the back door looking in. And this really becomes the story of the city of Memphis. Like how are we so left out of the major leagues, right? So we can jump forward to the 1970s, the World Football League, right? And so we already know that the American Football League, Lamar Hunt, right, has done an incredible job going head up with the NFL, creating the merger, right? The original Super Bowls, right? And Memphis at this time is like, you know what? We've got the base, we've got the financial leverage. There's enough money in this city that we should be major league. And when we actually had an organization, Tim, it was called the Mid-South Action Group. The city of Memphis actually hired a gentleman by the name of Mike Lynn to come down to Memphis and really focus in on getting the NFL to the city of Memphis. And by 1973, we're sitting there right on the edge. And then the World Football League shows up at our doorstep, and we're at a paradox. What do we do? Do we continue fighting for the NFL and get left out? Or do we join the World Football League? And so, Tim, many of your listeners are going to know we put the NFL to the side, and because we didn't trust them, right? Been left at the altar one too many times, and we joined the World Football League with marketing extraordinaire John Bassett at the helm of the Memphis Grizzlies.
Yeah, and he was probably the most even-keeled, yet enthusiastic. I mean, he originally wanted to have that team in Toronto, moved it to Memphis,
Right.
the Southmen. It was very well received for that
Absolutely.
year of
Right.
change, right?
Yeah, John Bassett talks about this. He goes, when I came to Memphis, and really when Bassett convinces the city's fathers to join the World Football League, take his team in, that really is the city saying, all right, we're done with the NFL for right now. We don't trust you. And so when he comes in, they're all in. They've got the Liberty Bowl Stadium, which is state of the art in the 1970s. Probably could use a few adjustments, because as stadiums go, it's somewhere around 10 years old and probably needs some renovations, but they're all in. And Bassett is marketing extraordinaire. Elvis Presley is at pretty much every home game. Isaac Hayes, Stax Records, Shaft is at every game. He is putting on a show, and Memphians are coming out. Bassett describes the World Football League as 15 other teams, and he had the most money, and everybody else was hanging on by a thread. And what this shows us in 1974 is that Memphis is major league. Now, the World Football League, not so much, but the city of Memphis, absolutely. And in fact, Bassett put his money where the mouth is, signing Zonka, Kick, and Warfield. Now, those guys, if you remember correctly, Tim, were the central pieces in the 1972 Miami Dolphins undefeated season. And so, Bassett puts a winner on the field. There's a winner on the field. Memphis fans are there. And Memphis in the 70s is like, we've got it. We're in. And then 6 games into 75, the league folds. And here we are at the altar once again, the bridegroom again without the NFL, right? And so it sort of starts to weigh on the psyche of the Memphian and whether they truly believe that they can get the NFL to come to Memphis.
Yeah, but for a hot minute there, games in Memphis were quite the thing. And in terms of and Tim, Bassett makes a return appearance, right, in the
Absolutely.
USFL years later with Tampa Bay, and um, uh,
Oh,
and was instrumental in the league's formation and survival for as long as it lasted. Was Bassett part of any kind of effort to bring Memphis in to the USFL fold in its
wholeheartedly.
first expansion?
Right. So Bassett actually, there's a lawsuit between the World Football League and the NFL that actually gets played out in the 80s after the USFL begins playing, right? So he is still going back and forth to Memphis, and he's really good friends with Billy Donovan, right? Billy Donovan is a cotton magnet. He has as much money as any NFL owner. He absolutely has as much or more money than any other owner in the entire USFL, right? Including the guy that owns the New Jersey Generals. And so Billy Donovan and John Bassett are good friends. And there's another Memphian that's an Alabama booster. His name is Logan Young. And Logan is really in the 1980s pushing for the USFL. And John Bassett's work inside of the league, inside of the USFL, to open the doors to Memphis as a USFL franchise without John Bassett. Memphis doesn't even get a look-see by the USFL because a lot of the USFL folks know the history of the city and the inability of the city to land an NFL team. Yet, Memphis is the quintessential USFL city, the city looking to prove it's NFL worthy.
Yeah, and with it, big city quote unquote ambitions, right? We've seen this theme many, many times before as his history has rolled on, right? Major
Right.
metropolitan areas or metropolitan areas not so major, wanting to become
Mhm.
major big by getting a quote unquote big league, something in the realm of pro sports, and USFL football. I think people have to remember the early '80s when it was put together. Obviously, spring as a new window and
Right.
plenty of markets that the NFL still hadn't really discovered yet, so to speak. And it was a big deal in its time, and it was rating for talent and all that kind of stuff. But so, all right, so it's interesting. So it's very interesting that both Bassett and Donovan were shall we say stable and well funded founder types, right? That
Oh, absolutely.
where whereas perhaps many franchises in both of those leagues were not necessarily such. Why do
Right.
you think? Maybe I guess a little bit of the origin story. How does Memphis get on the radar of the USFL, and perhaps maybe why wasn't Memphis perhaps part of the initial group in the first season, 1983?
Right. So David Dixon, the same guy that beat us out in New Orleans, comes up with this plan for spring football, and his plan really is to get a group of teams together, start relatively small, build, uh, don't have rosters where you're exceedingly going over budget, and Memphis was sort of not really in 82 when Dixon is putting the league together, doesn't get a lot of traction. And then in 83, Logan Young, that Alabama booster, is so persistent. And his persistence, along with John Bassett's understanding of how much of a football town Memphis is, leads to the USFL under Chet Simmons accepting Memphis in a league meeting right after the 1983 USFL championship, right? There's a debate whether the USFL wanted to add 4 teams for 84 or 6, and Memphis slides in as the most believed to be the sixth and final team that is added to the league roster for the 84 season. Now, Logan Young has got some good money, but he doesn't have NFL money. He doesn't have USFL money. And so he gets the ball rolling. And then right around the time that camp starts in January, it becomes apparent that Logan doesn't have the money he needs for Memphis to be successful. And once again, Johnny Bassett, who grew up playing tennis, all right, amateur tennis with Billy Donovan, calls up Donovan. And then you got to remember, Donovan is the guy that opened up trading cotton to China. Donovan's the guy that in the cotton world took a business that was regional and he made a cotton exchange in New York City. Like, this is the type of money this dude has, but he's a very quiet, low-key, many people call him very country. He's got a farm down in Mississippi. He likes to fish. He likes to hunt. And he doesn't need the front pages of a newspaper. But he's got the money of all the guys that do seek the newspaper. And so Bassett convinces Simmons that this guy's got the money. Let's bring him in. And immediately, I mean, Billy Donovan puts $12 million on the table and says, let's go. Here we go. And he's ready to build the city of Memphis into a winner.
So Young, though, got the franchise, but he basically couldn't access, I guess, some inherited funds or trust fund or whatever. He couldn't.
Right. Yeah.
So he brings in Donovan basically as a minority investor, majority investors. He's still investor. Part of the mix, though. Okay.
Billy Donovan comes in as the dude.
Got it. Okay. So they're essentially co-owners, but with all due respect, Donovan's got basically the bigger money man here.
Yeah. Yeah. Logan Young is on the records. And really, he just steps aside and understands that if we're going to get this done, and really, let's not forget that without Logan Young being the booster that he was for Memphis, the USFL doesn't even consider the Memphis Showboats, and John Bassett doesn't need to step in to help us get a franchise. So Logan Young has a huge piece, but Billy Donovan, he's got the money.
Was there groundswell in Memphis generally for getting one of these teams, given how shot out of a cannon the USFL was in 1983? I think it despite what we learned about it later, but the USFL certainly, I think, surprised a lot of naysayers very early on.
Remember, the key example is the first year in 83, Donald Trump was given the opportunity to buy the New Jersey Generals, and he passed. He, too, didn't believe that the USFL will stick. Walter Duncan, who I think he may be from Chicago, Tim, maybe you know more, is somewhere in the Midwest. The USFL needs a team in New York City for its ABC and ESPN contracts, and Duncan gets them on their feet. And then Trump comes in 84, purchases the Generals at the same time that Donovan is coming in with the Showboats, right? So really, the two trajectories go side by side.
Well, it's also interesting, too, because there are 5 other teams that join in that second year, right? So, I mean, it's let's put it this way. It was quite a sensation in its first season, but even in the best of times, right? In the early 1980s, when we're coming out of an economic recession and all that, adding 6 teams in the year 2 is a ballsy move.
Oh, absolutely. But I think, Tim, don't miss this, right? There's a little cable network company in Connecticut, and it's called ESPN. Now, Tim, growing up in upstate New York, ESPN was one of the first cable stations that I tuned into in the early 1980s, right? So Bristol, Connecticut, no one knows about ESPN. The NFL doesn't know about ESPN. But ESPN's the first really big president, Chet Simmons, leaves ESPN, and he's the first commissioner of the USFL. So the first thing that Simmons does is he signs a TV deal with ESPN. And then ABC, who remember in the 1980s, outside of Monday Night Football, Sundays were controlled by NBC and CBS. So ABC, they too sign a contract. And it's really the television money that allows the USFL to weather the storm in 83 to get to 84 and 85.
Tell us how this team comes literally into being from its name.
Yeah.
And
right.
I think it's pretty obvious that the stadium is pretty much there and obvious.
Right.
Yeah, but it's also not the largest market out there, right? But you're saying,
Nah.
clear, it's a southern market with football heritage and appetite. So it's probably a relatively safe bet. How would you gauge, based on your research, the enthusiasm from the general populace for bringing a USFL team in year 2?
Well, there's a couple of things, right? Like, so there's always this chip on our shoulder that Memphis is minor league. Here's Memphis's chance to prove that we are major league. And I think one of the reasons why Billy Donovan was put his money where his mouth was, he truly believed, right, that Memphis was major league. If you know anything about professional tennis, right, the Memphis Open was actually brought here because Billy Donovan built a professional grade tennis facility in Memphis, Tennessee. I actually lived 2 blocks from where that was built. And, he was going to do whatever it took to put Memphis on the map with tennis. And when his buddy John Bassett calls in and says, let's do this with football, he says, okay, let's do it. Like I did it with tennis. Memphis deserves to be on the front page of the sports. They deserve to, when you look at the USFL scores, when you look at, what's happening week to week in the USFL, every week the Memphis Showboats are there, right? So now I think, Tim, your listeners are going to appreciate this. The Showboats is a very interesting name, and it's appropriate because Memphis sits on the Mississippi River, and these showboats were carnivals on water with a paddle wheel. And get this picture in this image of this huge white paddle boat with a red paddle in the back, spinning in a circle, 2 smokestacks, a calliope on the back, and just this like Wild West, loosey-goosey entertainment. Go down to the river and check it out. Now, Tim, doesn't that sound like the USFL?
Yeah, and the visual just made for a great logo too.
Absolutely, right? So, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution actually, when it's describing our head coach Pepper Rogers, said that for the first time, a professional franchise actually named their club after their head coach, which is, once again, who more to be a showman than the absolute showman Pepper Rogers, Georgia Tech, UCLA, Wing T. I mean, Pepperball. Like it all fits. And Memphians, whether they were white, whether they were black, they all came out to see the football games. And the crowds, as the team started to build, were increasing. And especially in 85. In 85, we're in the top 3 in attendance, right? The 2 Florida clubs, let's just be honest, football in Florida is life. There's life, and there's life with football. The 2 go hand in hand. And so to come in behind those 2 clubs speaks boldly of Memphis's ability to pack the Liberty Bowl.
So describe a little bit about the first season and how the team gets stocked, right?
Right.
The USFL was famous for having this sort of hometown kind of rule where they would try to allow teams in their markets to have first dibs or protection, if you will, for players that are within a certain vicinity from the collegiate game to keep their sort of talent somewhat closer to home, and obviously
Right.
their commercial appeal and that kind of stuff. But with 6 expansion franchises in the 1984 season, and the fact that you had a whole bunch of teams from the previous year, right?
Right.
I got to think that I think there's a lot of question about where they were going to get talent to stock a team so quickly and with some decent level of chance of success.
Tim, we're going to start with one player, and it's the one player that everybody knows. He's on the cover of my book. It's Reggie White. Like, let's go right there. Like, Reggie White makes the Showboats, right? Chattanooga kid, All-American end at Tennessee, and the NFL, in its arrogance, is like, he's not playing in that league. He's going to play with us. That they didn't even really, serenade him, right? And so Reggie White signs with the Memphis Showboats, right? We use what you referred to as the regional draft, right? The USFL is very intentional in having a regional draft and the regular draft, both of which took place before the NFL draft, which put the USFL as a league in front of the NFL. And at the top, that's where the money's going. Let me give you some names. See if these USFL names sound familiar to any of your listeners. How about Herschel Walker? Reggie Collier? Doug Flutie? Tim, what do they all have in common?
New Jersey Generals.
How about a Heisman?
Heisman Trophy. Sorry, that's the
USFL
first one.
lands
Yeah. Of course. Huge. Yeah, right.
Three
Talent
straight
rating, talent rating.
Heismans, right? And the USFL is making noise. Now, Pete Rozelle protecting the shield. Oh, the USFL will disappear. They said the same thing about the AFL. And so when we land Reggie White, that's a coup for the USFL. And we're going to build around Reggie White. And in fact, in 84, Pepper Rogers is known as his offensive guru. Not 84. Baby, in Memphis in 1984, it was Reggie White and whoever else you put around him. And really, that was what kept us. We end up 7-11, right? For an expansion team. And, I think, you really have to, some of the pieces were there. And Reggie White, and then at the end of the season, Billy Donovan had spent, or loses, $12 million. And so what he does, because Billy's a winner, is he goes up to New York City, flies Steve Earhart, the number 2 guy at the USFL, down to Memphis, puts him in a car. They go down to his farm in Mississippi. And they get out there, and he's like, look, Steve, I need you to run the Showboats. I know how good you are. I'm going to do whatever it takes to win. And he convinces Earhart to come to Memphis. And then to boot, after losing $12 million, goes, Steve, here's $20 million. Give me an NFL team on that field for 85. And he does. Absolutely, Steve Earhart. If you look at the 85 roster, when the 85 roster is done, 22 of the guys that play for the Showboats in 85, 5 years later, are still in the NFL. So our one deep was as good as any NFL team after 85. And I would argue that if you give Steve Earhart another year, it's not one deep. Our 2 deep is as good as any NFL franchise.
Yeah, Tim Spencer and Greg Moser, I think some Mike Kelly. I mean, some great, some really good, solid performers that could easily
What if
in
in the
NFL
80s
franchises, right?
What if in the 80s, Walter Lewis gets the respect that Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes gets today? What if we looked at quarterbacks in the 80s as guys that could take it outside the ends or they could hum it downfield? right? Remember in the 1980s, you're talking about what? Joe Montana, Dan Marino, right? John Elway. We looked for the 6'3" to 6'5" quarterback who was the traditional drop back dude that could wing it 60 yards on a dime. And really, Memphis had Walter Lewis. Another year or two of work, he might be a Lamar Jackson or a Patrick Mahomes.
Why do you think it took a little while to kind of get the crowds in and maybe the buzz going in that first season of '84? You look at some of the stats
Well,
for the attendance and stuff, but they also started in February, early March, right? Not necessarily the best weather in Memphis, but they did grow, and and by the end of this first season, they were selling out the place. What's the dynamic there?
well, I think one thing is Pepper Rogers absolutely positively connected with the town, right? So we had this cheerleading group called the Dream Boats. I talk about them in my book. And Pepper would be right next to the cheerleaders if they went to the mall, if they went to the zoo, wherever they went with the public marketing scheme that the team put out there. I mean, Pepper Rogers was there. How many NFL coaches, head coaches today, can be seen at every single marketing event, right? Like most of these guys, no disrespect, a lot of them are prima donnas. They're like, my job is to coach and win football games, and that's what I'm going to do. Whereas Pepper Rogers was the guy, right? Like he is engaging the city of Memphis, and you just gotta. He's a. It's like a showboat captain, right? He's on the Mississippi River, and Pepper Rogers in 1985 takes Mike Kelly as a quarterback, who was the backup, who's now starting in '85, puts Walter Lewis, the guy that Mike replaced in the backfield, takes Derek Crawford, puts him in motion. Mike Kelly goes out to the end. Walter Lewis steps under quarterback, and Derek Crawford, who's a speedster, right? And everybody I talked to said there's probably nobody faster on the showboats except maybe Gizmo Williams in the backfield, and everybody's in motion. Like, if you're on the other side and you're a linebacker, Tim, what are you thinking? Like, hold up. Walter Lewis can run. He can pitch it to Crawford. He can either run or he can go out on a route. Mike Kelly's over there, who's 6'4", the size of a tight end. What's next? And that is what endeared Memphians to Pepper Rogers, because you never knew, like a good showboat captain, what was coming next.
How did the town take to them and the media and all that kind of stuff? It seems like it's kind of a love affair. Kind of maybe being cheer-led by Rogers at the front.
Yeah, there's a guy. So it's kind of funny. I had this guy's grandson in class this year, Jarvis Greer, who's a sports reporter, and he actually played football at the high school I teach. And then he had a walk-on scholarship at Memphis State at the time. And he was, a young reporter in the 1980s, and the Showboats allowed him to dress out for a week during training camp. And so Jarvis Greer, the sports reporter for the local news, is padded up playing professional football with the Memphis Showboats, right? And the commercial appeal absolutely, positively is engaged. They're at all the spring training. They're doing stories on Walter Lewis signs, Reggie White. Reggie White signs. If your listeners haven't been to Memphis, they got to come to the Peabody. Like, the Peabody is the Southern hotel, right? So when Reggie White and Walter Lewis sign major signings, it's at the Peabody by the Ducks, right? They're getting keys to the city. The city's engaged, right? The leadership, the sports community, the media, everybody is in. I think this is really when Donovan shows up and puts the money behind the team, the city goes, you know what? We got a chance. And if we really want to be seen as major league, we better get out there. And I think they do. And when they start winning, and the first couple of weeks of any expansion club are going to be tough. You're trying to figure it out. You don't really have any veterans, and yeah, it was tough early. But like you said, as the season progressed, and then in '85, when Earhart comes in, all bets are off, and we become, like I said, one of the top three teams in filling the stands for fan attendance.
Steve Earhart does the forward for your book. Maybe a little bit of background on him. Some great pictures of him in his office from years ago. Essentially, he ran. I don't know if he still does. Part of the Liberty Bowl Classic there, right? The college game.
Yeah, he
Um,
is. He's still
got a
in
ton of
charge of
memorabilia
the
still
Liberty
there, right?
Bowl. So really, what most people don't know is that Billy Donovan, the Liberty Bowl, probably about 20 years ago, was teetering, and Billy Donovan has reached out and tabbed Steve Earhart again. I think for your listeners, in 1984, right at the end of the '83 season, when Donovan brings Earhart to Memphis, here's what folks need to understand: there were 3 or 4 NFL teams actively pursuing him to be their GM. There were at least a half dozen USFL clubs doing the same thing. And so when Donovan signs Earhart, and like me, he's not from Memphis. Earhart's fallen in love with the city. He's still here, right? His love for Memphis is going to help guide. Let's see, was it '92? The Memphis Hound Dogs. Uh, our last attempt at an NFL team. He's around with the Liberty Bowl. I mean, Steve Earhart has become a sporting fixture in this city.
How how does this team grow out of this sort of USFL sort of envelope, so to speak, and become? I mean, because by the end of the first season, right, you're selling out. They're selling out
Right.
the bowl, and it's clearer that they're fair to middling in terms of on field performance. But next year they had some bumps along the way too. But it's clear by the next season, right, with that 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 motivation and that mandate, if you will, that
Right.
they were in the hunt to
Right.
actually
Now,
be competitive and play for the title.
one of the things that there's a really neat dynamic between Steve Earhart and Billy Donovan. Donovan put $20 million on the table, and in fact, the book also talks about not only did he have 20 million on the table with Steve to get players, he was willing to build a dome stadium in the suburbs. And he put his money where his mouth was there. He said, if the city comes with me, I will absolutely help fund a dome stadium, right? So uh, one of the things that Billy Donovan prided himself on in business was he understood the dynamics of what he was into. And when he brought somebody in, he, number one, wholeheartedly trusted you and he let you do your job. He did not micromanage. So you're not going to see like a Jerry Jones, coming in and, we're going to get rid of this guy or we're signing this guy, or there wasn't any of that, right? So Donovan was like, Steve, this is your team. And the pressure, like, the Showboats go through a 4-game slide in the middle of '85. And the pressure, now that the newspaper's kind of funny, the commercial appeal sort of paints the picture as Donovan. And Steve Earhart was very upfront with that. He goes, that absolutely positively was not Billy. That was 100% me. I walked into the locker room. I slammed the door. I got in front of the entire team. I had a face-to-face with Pepper Rogers. And we were like, look, Donovan's put the money on the table. The players in this room are here. You're either going to start to win or you guys are going to start to leave. And Earhart, he's the GM, the right guy at the right time from Memphis. And that's really right after that little 4-game skid, the offensive coordinator leaves. Pepper Rogers takes that back over, and then he inserts Mike Kelly back as the starting quarterback. We're out playing the Denver Gold. And to be honest, Mike Kelly has a hell of a second part of the 85 season. He actually, it was absolutely the best football he ever plays in his career. And Tim, to be honest, I interviewed Mike, and he just absolutely gloated about how much fun that it was playing in Memphis, how that 1985 run to the USFL semifinals was his favorite time of playing football his entire career. And look, Mike Kelly, along with, we have 4 running backs, right? We've got a stable full of guys. And in fact, in a league that sells itself as a high-powered, high-octane, I mean, the Memphis Showboats turned into a grind it, 3 yards and a pile of dust. We're just coming straight down your throat. And it won. And were it not for Anthony Carter, Hall of Famer, Anthony Carter, with quarterback Bobby Hebert and the Oakland Invaders, we would have played for the USFL championship in '85.
Yeah, it's interesting. They had 2 home games in '85. The Showboats did. The first one
Right.
actually was not supposed to be there. It was supposed to be actually at Denver. Let
Right.
me use that as a prelude, right? 1985, obviously people have to remember that that was the year after basically its 3rd year this league was going on,
Right.
the split was starting to emerge between owners about should we somehow challenge the NFL, perhaps head on by going to a fall season and directly competing. Um, Set the
Yeah.
table for that, and in particular, where the ownership of the Showboats were in that argument.
Right. So, David Dixon, when he starts the USFL, really wants the league to move slowly. I think some of the contracts got really Steve Young, Herschel Walker, Doug Flutie are signing these ginormous contracts, right? And even Reggie White's money is really good money. And so by 1984, the owner of the New Jersey Generals is really going to start to push for going head up. Donald Trump really wanted an NFL franchise. He believed that New York City could host a 3rd NFL club. And so what happens in the ownership is there's a divide. John Bassett, who's still down in Tampa Bay, is absolutely positively adamant that spring football is it, that if we leave this alone and we give it another 4 or 5 years, the NFL will have no choice because we're going to have these TV contracts, we're going to have the best players, our product will be as good, if not better, than the NFL in 5 years. Let's take our time. Let's do what David Dixon said. Now, the other half follows Donald Trump, and they're like, no, I don't think we should just right now. Let's move to a fall matchup. Let's go head up. We're good right now. We've got the players, we've got the money, we've got the talent. Let's go to battle right now.
Well, and we think we've got a case legally.
Right, absolutely, right. So there's a Sherman antitrust law. Like the NFL is absolutely positively breaking antitrust laws, keeping the USFL down as a little brother. And that case actually sticks, before the 85. So the 85 season finishes. And in fact, in 85, the Michigan Panthers are gone. The Philadelphia Stars have to go to Baltimore. Teams, the Denver club is going to have to fold because you can't have the Denver Broncos and the Denver Gold, right? The Breakers, which started out in New England, moved to New Orleans. They've got to go out to Portland, right? So by 1985, the cast is set. We're going to go and we're going to compete in 86, head up for a fall season. Interesting enough, John Bass is like, I'm not going. The Tampa Bay Bandits will not be part of the USFL. We'll form our own league. We'll form a 3rd league, and we're not going. Now, everybody else, they're in. And believe it or not, Billy Donovan is like, okay, let's do that, right? Unlike Donald Trump, who really wants to be on the back page of the Post, right? If you're from New York City, you want to be on the back page of the Post because that's where the sporting news is. And Donald Trump has always tried to be on the back page of this. And, Tim, I'm not sure if your listeners know, but Trump actually signed Lawrence Taylor away from the New York Giants for about a week, right? And when the Giants took him back, he was like, it's okay. I got press for a week. I'm good, right? So this dynamic is going to play out. And so when the 85 season ends, and this is where we're headed, Tim, is it's going to be a court case, right? And if we foreshadow, we go ahead, the NFL actually paid its lawyers to try the case out. Give us the USFL argument. Give us our best NFL lawyers. They brought in a judge, paid the jury, played it out. The USFL won. Pete Rozelle was scared stiff that if this goes to trial, the NFL is in trouble because they're absolutely breaking the antitrust laws, except for one thing. Trump insists that the case is tried in New York City. And Earhart was pretty adamant about this, that Donovan was also along the lines of, look, if we take this case, let's not try this in New York City. Let's go to Memphis. Memphis is a smaller town. When you're talking about the Memphis Showboats, you're not in New York City. You don't have all the lights, all the glamour, all that stuff. You're in Memphis, Tennessee. And as the little brother, the USFL could have sold that case in federal court in Memphis. They would have won, and then that money would have allowed the USFL to continue playing in '86.
Well, and you're hinting right at not only Memphis but Jacksonville and Orlando and Birmingham.
Right.
These are all places where, where NFL football was not and could be or was in many cases, a bigger deal or a big deal because it was something that they had lusted for and could not get for whatever reasons. And here was their first taste of it. And by the way, in Memphis, doing quite well. Thank you.
Exactly. And so here's the thing, right? So if now, to be honest, Tim, your listeners, many of them know, the USFL wins the case, but the jury misunderstands the instructions and awards the USFL $1. The judge, by law, can treble that. So, following the court case, the USFL wins $3. And so many of the other smaller markets, Portland, Oklahoma, they're not going to last. And so they decide to fold. Interesting enough, Billy Donovan and Steve Earhart are adamant that with the ESPN contract, they can play in '86, make a go of it, and 3-4 years down the road, the NFL will have no choice but to merge. But some of the bigger names on the side of playing in the fall, they throw in the towel, and the rest is history. Memphis is once again left at the altar.
So, and I'm sure heartbreaking to a lot of football fans, but there's some part
Absolutely.
of this that's really interesting to me too, that I think the Showboats had some role in. And I was kind of unfamiliar with this. Some of this is in your book, and some of this is from other things that I've read and stuff, and only recently come to.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie Finley makes an appearance in some of this, right? And do I have this right? He was trying to encourage some kind of combination with some of these leftover, still semi-viable former USL franchises to kind of do some kind of deal, relationship, merger with the CFL. Now, this is in the late 1980s, right? This is not even the 1990s conversation that we can maybe tickle a little bit. But the Showboats were kind of management was kind of up for kind of trying to soldier on in some
Right.
way, shape, or form like this. No.
Right. I think, yeah, they listen without a shadow of a doubt. Like John Bassett, you got to remember in '85, John Bassett is fighting cancer and passes away before the end of the '85 season, right? So the major voice on the other side, Bassett, who I was totally for playing in the spring and is can't believe these guys are falling for this idea to go to the fall. Bassett had come up with like a World Football League, where teams would be in Tokyo or in London. Remember, the NFL copies this, right? The NFL Europe, right? The Monarchs, the
Yeah, the
Dragons, right?
World
They
League of
sell
American Football. Yeah, yeah.
World League American Football. Bassett is years ahead of the NFL, absolutely years ahead of the NFL. I would argue, Tim, that Donovan would have, probably listened more to John Bassett than Charles Finley, right? Um, and really, Donovan and Earhart really did try to take some of the remnants of some of the teams. You remember the Washington Federals had to move to what, Orlando and become the Renegades, or maybe it was the Washington Renegades. They're not hanging on. The Baltimore Stars, once they're the Baltimore Stars have like an incredibly crazy story. They play in Philly, they're the USFL champions, and then in '85, they're practicing in Philly and taking a bus to play at the University of Maryland's home stadium, becoming the Baltimore Stars, right? Um, there's just too many minor league hiccups uh, to sort of get past what Charles Finley and John Bassett are trying to do. And maybe Bassett pulls it off if his health is there, but I really, even then, I'm not even sure the wizardry of Bassett could have made that happen.
So how does the market, the fans, the press, the players, and the coaches, how do they feel after this 2-year adventure where they sort of had some amazing top tier pro football feelings on field and off the field? A
Right.
whole lot of success in the stadiums and playing and making the playoffs and just getting close to the final game, and then seeing it all essentially just turn off like a cold water
Right.
hose.
It's
What's the feeling? Abandonment or like, well, it was fun while it lasted?
Nah, more like abandonment. I really think Memphis, until we get the NBA Grizzlies, are just going to be left out as a minor league city, right? And just known as minor league. And that really, to be honest, Tim, as a kid growing up in New York, what did I know about Memphis, Tennessee, right? So I knew number one, that Elvis Presley was here because my mom was a huge Elvis fan. So I knew Graceland was in Memphis, right? And I think this will echo a lot with a lot of your, listeners. Number two, we all know that Martin Luther King was shot at the Lorraine Motel in the civil rights movement in 1968. So when it comes to a stop and all the issues surrounding that in the city of Memphis. But as a kid in the 1980s, I watched the Memphis Showboats, right? And so when I got a job offer in 1994, which is less than 10 years after the Showboats playing, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. And that's a city that I thought was okay. It's got to be a pretty solid city. And when the Showboats leave, that sort of takes what made the city major league. And there's going to be a number of iterations. The Canadian Football League spends 1 year in Memphis. There's a number of other leagues. There's the XFL. Jim McMahon and wrestling comes in with the He Hate Me XFL. All the dynamics that went along with that. I think the one that really stings Memphians most is that when Bud Adams decided to move the Houston Oilers to Nashville, his stadium in Nashville wasn't ready. And so he's like, well, I'm going to stop in Memphis for 2 years. And we really were like, no, dude, you don't really need to be here. And the stands were the exact opposite of what happened with the Showboats. It was absolutely empty. And he repainted the whole Liberty Bowl Columbia blue. Like, oh, like that's not even like Memphis Tiger blue, right? So he really pushed Memphis fans away. And Bud Adams in week number 16 is hosting a home game, and the Pittsburgh Steeler fans could come to Memphis, fly on a plane into Memphis International Airport, get a ticket at the Liberty Bowl for cheaper than that they would have stayed home and gone to see the Steelers play in Pittsburgh. And on that last day, the Steelers are wearing those terrible towels and they're flinging them around. And that right there, Tim, is emblematic of what we thought about Bud Adams. And you can take your Oilers or whatever you want to call them to Nashville, and that's it. So there's a stigma. And Tim, if you watch the NBA right now, Tim, what did LeBron James just say about Memphis and coming here?
I don't know.
LeBron James got on whatever social media and said, "Who wants to be in Memphis on a Thursday night?" And I was like, "Are you serious? Like, this is the face of the NBA?" And so Memphis closed ranks quickly. If you want to go around social media, you will find out people with signs, "Hey, LeBron, we don't want you here either." Right? So that stigma that nobody really wants to come to Memphis. Our fear, to be honest, even though we shot back at LeBron, is that the NBA takes our Grizzlies to Nashville. And would we be left at the altar once again as a major league city? And that's pretty serious here in the city of Memphis.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting code at all this, right? But I mean, there's no mistaking though that Memphis is a football town, or has been for some time on a number of different levels. Um, and what I did not know is that the Oilers were planning to spend 2 seasons there, but I can see why they didn't stick around. They figured, okay, let's go to Vanderbilt. We'll hang out somewhere else in Nashville. But it's unmistakable though that especially as these various spring leagues resprouted and now ultimately merged and melded into what is now the second incarnation, I guess, of the UFL, that Memphis, which had its cup of coffee in that bouillabaisse, right, and is no longer, which is another story, which I'll ask you about in a second. Now, but Memphis is always in that short list, right, of places where, of course, we should think about having a franchise in quote unquote alt football land, right? And I'm sure Memphis is tired, as is Birmingham and some of these others, right, of being sort of that second bench kind of consideration, right?
Right. So I think the UFL, number one, Fox Sports is such a huge conglomerate now. When they recreated the USFL, they were looking for spring programming for their sports, and they legitimately did not seek anybody's permission, any of the owners or general managers from the 80s in the USFL. And in fact, Steve Earhart, who still has his law degree and his license to practice law, said, okay, then. And so when they contacted Fox, they were like, cool, we're a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, sue us. Good luck. And Steve Earhart and about 5 or 6 other the USFL guys that are still around decided to go out, and they went out to California, found a court that was going to work with them. They, played the game well with their jurisprudence, and Fox Sports gave the former owners a nice chunk of change. Like, I don't know, it was somewhere around $500,000-$600,000, right? And a Fox Sports, that's like a drop in the bucket. That's a couple of ads during football season.
For what? The rights and the name and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's what they did, for the rights to the names. And so, interesting enough, Mr. Trump, when the lawsuit went out, actually declined to take part. He's had a little more interest since they got some money. It's just interesting to see who's in, who's out, who sees that. But I think in essence, the USFL, when they merged with whatever that other league was, the XFL or the second iteration of the XFL, and became the UFL, the USFL team, the second iteration, was practicing in Houston and then flying to Memphis. So none of the things that happened in the 80s, where Pepper Rogers and the team They weren't at the malls. They weren't at the schools. They weren't at the amusement parks. They weren't connecting with the city. And in fact, the only time that the Memphis Showboats in this last iteration were in Memphis was on game days. And then after the game, they showered, got on a plane, and went back to Houston. So the city didn't connect. And when this iteration wonders why the Liberty Bowl is empty, it's not really the city. It's the league who did a very poor job of connecting with Memphians who still long to be Major League.
Yeah, and look, I think that reincarnated USFL was certainly a television product first and second, perhaps even
Absolutely.
third, right? I think Birmingham is
Hey,
a great example of
definitely.
that, right? And so there's a grassroots absence there, right? There's no,
Mhm.
it doesn't feel real. It feels like just a name.
Right.
And I think this is what bedevils a lot of minor league or challenger league or neo sports league kind of things too, where they slap the names on stuff, but they centralize them. They're really in name only, and they're eschewing sort of the harder work of digging the roots and stuff. So let me ask you this then, as sort of to cul-de-sac all of this, right?
All
So
right.
where do you think Memphis kind of sits now in relation to pro football, maybe even the collegiate game with the Liberty Bowl and stuff? Now that the new UFL has moved on from Memphis, I mean, what of the sport and the city going forward? I mean, are there any last chances for this kind of stuff? Is it kind of just run its course? Where do you and the legacy, right? I mean, to know all these different pro teams, in particular this one, probably most prominently, maybe the WFL one too, um,
Right.
made an impression for this city, for football generally, and it has kind of done lots of the proof that's really needed. What else do you kind of need from a market like this to kind of, really make a true, lasting go at it, or is the ship sailed? Maybe
Well,
sadly.
I think on the professional level, right? I'll go back to when the NFL was going to expand. They're down to Charlotte, Jacksonville, and Memphis are in this conversation. And Roger Goodell, who's not the commissioner yet, has been sent to Memphis, and he's like, "Look, if you guys got the stadium, you guys are going to get this. We're good. We need a team in the Central Time Zone." And Memphis, we've come up, we've Memphis goes all in once again. And I really think the last go round for the city of Memphis is when we were left at the altar when the Carolina Panthers and the Jacksonville Jaguars, who were both on the East Coast, when everybody's like, we need a southern city in the Central Time Zone. And, how many times can the NFL come to Memphis, sell us a bag of goods, get us in there? We'll put exhibition games, we'll put money on the table. And how many times can we fall for that? So I think Memphis currently has no intention of getting an NFL team, right? And doing a lot of work with Steve Earhart. Steve made the statement, and I honestly believe this, that if the Showboats, the Memphis Showboats of the 1980s, were to actually have earned a merger, Billy Donovan would have been one of the top 10 NFL owners in the game. Memphis would have put itself on the map. There would have been a winner, and Memphis would not have this minor league complex, right? Yet history has played out. The USFL folds. Memphis is left at the altar again. And really, I think the football fans have sort of been left out to dry, right? Even with the University of Memphis, right? The University of Memphis with Fred Smith, the guy that owns FedEx, right? Before he passed away, he put a ton of money on the table, and the Big 12 just told us no again, right? Memphis, the University of Memphis is constantly trying to get into one of these Power Four conferences, and is the echo, right? When I teach my history class, I teach my kids history doesn't repeat itself; it echoes. Are you listening? And the echo is very strong that these major conferences are leery of Memphis. And as far as a sports town, that puts us in a pretty tenuous position. We're holding on to the Grizzlies for everything we have and hoping that we can, flip our roster and move from there and try to keep the success of the NBA franchise to keep us on the map of being Major League.
All right, so let me then throw that last bit, and you kind of hinted at it before, right? So, um, do the Grizzlies stay? Do they regionalize? It seems like Adam Silver, in his lukewarm commitment to Memphis, and I'm asking you this as a resident and a longtime
Right,
student of this region, right?
right.
Um, and obviously the Nashville thing, right? There is something to be said for, and I see this now with a lot of private equity investors in pro sports these days, right? Where there's sort of all these sort of spreadsheet jockeys are kind of recognizing, well, we can, we'll create sort of regional franchises, right? That are,
Right.
have a bigger DMAs and bigger market share, and try to sell to a tri or quad state area, right? Versus it just being a city, right?
Well,
There might be something to that if you're the NBA, maybe not if you're Memphis, right?
yeah, I think, for Memphis, right, the big thing would be, we've tried that. Like the number of Memphians that actually make the 200-mile trip to Nashville on Sundays for football is very limited. We
It's
made
kind
the
of it's kind of like
blackout
Northern
zone.
California, Southern California. They're not really the same,
Right.
nor should they be
It's
considered.
really the state of Tennessee is three very unique places. You've got Knoxville in East Tennessee, right? And you've got Nashville, which is made down the middle of the state, and then you've got Memphis. And those are three totally different places. The culture, the history, the heritage, even the sports history, each has their own very unique place. And I just for me, that idea of making it a regional would just Memphis would just turn it off and be like, okay, we'll just we're gonna be who we are and just then be a minor league city we've got the Cardinals AAA organization for baseball. Um, and we get soccer periodically in and out. And I think if the Grizzlies left, that would leave the money that we usually give the NBA to maybe get like a club like I don't 901 FC to come back. Right. I just if the NBA tries to play the game where they see Memphis as part of a regional uh positioning, where Nashville is the center. And look, let's be honest. Nashville is the center of country music, right? It's a flashier, it's more marketable, it's got hockey, right? It's got NFL football, it's got all those things that major leagues want, right? And so it's just puts Memphis in a really tough situation. But my personal opinion was if the NBA ups and leaves, that'll be it. Memphis, you won't see Memphians cheering for anybody in Nashville.
So where does the legacy of the Showboats live? Like where are the I never were any championship banners or anything like that. But where aside from people like us talking about it and in books like yours and in the archives that people like Paul Reiths and others are keeping to keep the
Right.
flame alive, where where can people viscerally see, remember, where are the plaques? Where are is there anything, is there any physical remnant of the existence of this team that people can visit and remember and all that kind of stuff? Or is it really just kind of here and now, no longer with us?
Well, Tim, I really think this book was a piece of that. Like, it's a piece of the history that has sort of been pushed aside with the USFL. What Paul Reitz is doing with the video archive is incredible, right? His first book, that really is a description of the entire USFL experience from 82 to 86. He does a great job covering the history of the league. Now, he is so committed to getting these 1980s videotapes scanned and put in a digital format so that the history of this league can be saved. I mean, you're talking about quality players all over. That Doug Williams leaves the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and plays in Oklahoma. Herschel Walker, Reggie White, Steve Young. I mean, you can start talking about the names. Joe Cribbs leaves the Buffalo Bills and plays in Birmingham. That league absolutely had talent. And I think it's a forgotten league. And I think books like mine, hopefully, your listeners will pick it up and go, oh, yeah, I remember those guys, right? So help me out. You're up in Chicago, right, Tim?
Yeah.
What was the name of the quarterback that was playing with the Bears? It was an African American quarterback. And when they drafted Jim McMahon, he goes and plays for the Blitz. Um, oh, I can't remember that guy's name off the top of my head. Um, so he was with what Dick is like, I'm going with Jim McMahon, and this guy's like, cool, I'm just gonna go play with the Blitz. So there's a number of quarterbacks, like the guy that was in New Jersey the year before Trump signs Flutie is the Cleveland Browns quarterback. You know, there are some quality guys that are making rosters, and I'm telling you, like Jim Mora was the head coach of the Baltimore Stars. Like he's got a USFL championship and he does well in the NFL. Like this, I think the more people jump into the USFL and they jump back and they go watch some of these stream games, the video archives that Paul Reitz is recreating or holding on to, and they take a look. And then there's a guy that just what was the guy that did the book down in San Antonio? There was somebody inside the marketing department that just wrote a book on the San Antonio Gunslingers.
Yeah, Greg
He's
Singleton.
self-published.
He'll be on a
Yeah,
future episode as well. Yes, where it's all USFL
exactly.
all the
Like
time around here. Yeah.
right. So I'm a historian and I'm a guy on the outside that Steve Earhart gave me enough inside stuff. So you've got the Memphis Showboats. Here's the guy that's inside the San Antonio organization. I mean, oh my gosh, their quarterback is the UCLA guy that ends up coaching the Colorado, University of Colorado. What's the guy's name? Oh my gosh, their quarterback. So there's dudes, right? I think there's enough dudes, and I'm using that term because you can't name every guy, right? There probably are some of your listeners that can, right? And so there's some really talented players, and I think if people go back, they'll be like, "Wow, here was a missed opportunity." And man, these were some good football games to watch, right? I really think that's what makes the USFL so unique and worth going back and taking a look at once again.
Okay, so let me here last thing then let's leave it on an optimistic note, right? So
Absolutely.
so I mean it's hard to ignore that Memphis has a real football current running through it, right?
Right.
We can argue about, university getting into to a Power Four conference and stuff, but there's something to be said for the fact that time and time again, that Memphis is always on that sort of short list of places where football probably could have another shot, right? It seems to me that it's in an era now that we're in, and I don't know how long it lasts. I'm told at every
Right.
turn that this is going to be a hockey stick upward and it's never going to collapse, right? But with the advent of private equity coming into all the top tier sports, as well as funding every whiff of a concept in other kinds of sports, that
Mhm.
Memphis and many other areas of this country could not only have football, but thriving pro sports if one only believes that there is an unfettered appetite for pro sports in this country. There's got to be a
Well,
place at the
absolutely.
table for
Right.
Memphis in some way, shape, or form. No?
I think, the city has got a fan base that, if given an opportunity, and I think the other thing is this, right? And you can use this when you look at the Grizzlies. When you had Tony Allen, Marcus Gasol, Zach Randolph, and you had grit and grind, this city absolutely, positively got behind the Grizzlies. And that shows us that Memphis is major league if given a NFL team like we had in the 84, 85 USFL Showboats. and that you take a picture, and they can go to my website. I've got the game between Oakland and the Showboats, the Invaders and the Showboats. Bobby Hebert, absolutely. When he describes this game, he said, I played in every NFL stadium with the Saints. The Liberty Bowl was one of the toughest places I've ever played. Which, Tim, there it is. We're an NFL city. Give us a chance. Put an owner with the wherewithal. Give us a chance to be big time. And you're right. Memphis would absolutely. Now, this idea of equitably working in big cities like Chicago, New York, Philly, if the equity is there, Memphis absolutely has a chance to be major league.
All right, promote the heck out of the book. It's been out for a little while. What's the reception?
Been well.
Are you gonna promote in person? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Really, right now, I'm making the podcast circuit, trying to pick up as many pods to get the word out. The book, the Memphis Showboats, the USFL team, and the city's fight for major league status. Tim, you did a great job today, really hammering out how great this team was, and really what it meant to the city of Memphis. Appreciate McFarland for doing that. Your listeners, if they're on Facebook, I've got a Keith Wood author page on Instagram. I also have an author's page. My website, www.keithbwoodauthor.com. Would love to, hear what your fans think. Get a copy, pick it up, and, let me know what you think. Because this was a great book to write, man. Just loved putting this together and telling this story that I think folks need to hear.
I do hope the city and the folks there can sort of rally around some of these memories and stuff. And God forbid, there's another taste of another bite of the apple to be had. I don't think the UFL, is kind of done. And I think you hinted at it, where the grassroots kind of thing, right? If there's real stability to be had there, right? And you see it week after week, right? You see where the stands are full and where they're not, right? Louisville takes it kind of seriously, right? There's some other markets that kind of still don't, right? And Louisville's got, they've got NWSL soccer, they've got Division II soccer, and this is a big deal for them, right? This could be their, and it would be just criminal, right? If Louisville, if you want to start about sticks around,
right? The first book was on basketball. The Louisville Memphis thing, that's deep. that is a rivalry.
Old ABA, sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Really, Memphis, if given the chance, like you said, and that's what this story is about. Taking a look at a city that's been left at the altar, but for these, let's say 3 years, 84, 85, and 86, proved their wherewithal and proved they deserve to be major league.
All right. Many thanks to Keith for braving his way back to our little show. You may remember he was part of our episode 429. We talked about the Memphis Red Sox of the old and various Negro leagues. Please check that episode out. But the exploration of this team of the old USFL, it is another log on our fire of intrigue. Not only the USFL, but just general sports history. And we thank him for coming on back. The book, of course, is a must-get. It is called The Memphis Showboats, the USFL Team, and the city's fight for major league status. It is published by McFarland and is available now wherever you get your good books. Of course, you can get it conveniently through our friends at Amazon by clicking on our link here in your show description, here in your podcast catcher. or from our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com. Just search up this episode numbered 453, and you'll find the links there as well. And you'll get either the paperback or Kindle versions as fast as humanly possible. And we will get literally a few shekels of referral of by you doing so. However, I do want to save you some bucks and also enlighten you further into the works of Keith Wood, as well as in not just only the Memphis Showboats, but also his various explorations of Memphis sports. Just go to his website at keithbwoodauthor.com. Keith is Keith. The letter B as in boy, Wood, W-O-O-D, author, keithbwoodauthor.com, and you can get the book for, shall we say, a less expensive price, and perhaps even get a little signature or a little thank you from Mr. Wood generally and specifically. Consider it your little cheat code into saving some money and expanding your knowledge about this amazing time in Memphis sports history via the method known as the Memphis Showboats. And of course, you can follow Keith as well on, I think, on the X platform. Yeah, at Coach Wood 90, Coach Wood 90 on the X platform. While you're online there, again, bookmark our website, goodseatsstillavailable.com. We post all of our episodes there. You can also check out some merch, and you can give us a little tip or a little contribution to keep our little lights on here and our energy sources flowing so that we can keep pumping out these episodes for you. Please consider that, and we appreciate that. You can also, of course, follow us on various socials as well. We're on the X platform as well, too, he says, in addition. And that is at Good Seats Still. At Good Seats Still. That's where we are on X. You'll find us also on the Blue Sky platform at goodseatsstillavailable.com, and just about everywhere else in social media land at Good Seats Still Available, all one word, including YouTube, where you can follow us and or stream all these episodes. We put them up there for your convenience as well. Our email address is hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. And our thanks, of course, we tip our Memphis Showboats original USFL snapback cap in the general direction of one Jerry Payne for his audio excellence this week, as we rely on him once again, as we have for almost 10 years now. And we thank you for listening. More to come in the weeks ahead. Sadly, it will not be another USFL episode, but it'll be something you'll enjoy, I'm sure. And there's a lot more USFL to come in the weeks and months ahead for sure. Just keep tuned to your feeds, because that's the only way you're going to know. Thanks for listening. We'll see you soon.